Right now, somewhere in the world, a family is paying over $1,200 a year for water that falls free from the sky, and the system that could change that has been sitting in the dirt for 3,000 years, completely ignored. Not because it doesn't work, not because it's too complicated, but because the moment you understand how the system functions, you stop needing them. And that, right there, is the problem. This isn't a rain barrel. This isn't a filter you buy at a hardware store. What I'm about to show you is a self-replenishing water collection method so effective that entire civilizations survived in some of the driest places on Earth using nothing but this principle in their own two hands. No pumps, no pipes, no monthly bill, and for reasons I'll get into shortly, it was quietly allowed to disappear from modern knowledge right around the same time municipal water systems started becoming very, very profitable. Stay with me here, because by the end of this, you're going to understand something that most people will never know, and you're going to be able to use it. Here's what they've managed to convince most people: that clean, reliable water requires pipes, pumps, treatment plants, and a monthly bill you just have to accept. That's the story. That's the system. And if you've ever looked at your water bill and felt like something was slightly off, like you were paying for something that shouldn't cost this much, you were right. The average American household now spends between $70 and $100 a month on municipal water. That's over $1,000 a year, every year, for the rest of your life, for a resource that literally falls on your property for free multiple times a week. And that number is climbing. Water rates in the United States have increased by over 40% in the last decade alone. Not because water is getting scarcer, not because treatment is getting more expensive, but because the infrastructure requires constant maintenance. And guess who pays for that? You do. And look, I get it. Most people feel like they have no alternative. You need water. Your family needs water. The garden needs water. So you pay. You've always paid. And the system keeps getting more expensive because you've been taught there's no other way. But there is another way. There always has been. 3,000 years ago, long before Rome built its famous aqueducts, a civilization in the Middle East was already solving a problem that modern engineers still struggle with today. The Nabateans, a people who built their kingdom in one of the most arid regions on the planet, in what is now southern Jordan and northern Saudi Arabia, found a way to capture, store, and sustainably use water in a desert that received less than 2 inches of rainfall per year. 2 inches per year. And they didn't just survive, they thrived. The city of Petra, carved into rose-red sandstone cliffs, housed over 20,000 people at its peak. Fields were irrigated, fountains ran. Cisterns stayed full, even through the brutal summer months. Archaeologists who first studied Petra assumed there had to be some underground river or hidden spring they hadn't found yet. There wasn't. What there was, instead, was an engineering system so elegant and so perfectly matched to the landscape that modern water engineers have called it, and I'm quoting here, one of the most sophisticated pre-industrial water management systems ever discovered. It was a network of carved channels, silt-catching basins, and underground cisterns designed to harvest every single drop of rain, including the rare, violent flash floods, slow it down, filter it through the earth, and store it in sealed underground reservoirs that kept water cool, clean, and accessible for months. The whole system worked with gravity, with stone, with the natural shape of the land. No motors, no chemicals, no ongoing cost. And here's the part that honestly blew my mind when I first learned it. The system was designed so that the cisterns would slowly recharge the surrounding soil, which would then slowly feed back into the deeper cisterns through natural seepage. It was, for all practical purposes, an endless loop. Water in, water stored, water returned to the earth, water in again, endless water, just like the title says. So if this system works so well, and it did for thousands of years, why doesn't anyone talk about it? Why isn't this being taught? Why isn't every homesteader, every off-grid family, every backyard gardener doing this right now? Here's where we have to follow the money, because that's always where the answer is. At the turn of the 20th century, as American cities began building centralized water infrastructure, there was a very deliberate push to move households away from personal water collection and toward municipal dependence. Some of it was legitimate, as shared water sources in dense cities were becoming contaminated, and centralized treatment made sense in those contexts. But out in rural areas, on homesteads with land and space, the independent water systems that families had used for generations, cisterns, rain catchment, natural filtration, were quietly discouraged. In some states, they were eventually regulated out of existence, and it makes me genuinely frustrated that this happened. Because it wasn't about safety, it was about dependency. Because a household that collects, stores, and manages its own water doesn't need to be connected to anything. It doesn't generate revenue, it doesn't pay a bill, and when water infrastructure became one of the most stable, guaranteed income streams a municipality could have, independent water systems became a threat, not to public health, but to the bottom line. The knowledge didn't get banned outright, it just got allowed to fade. The old books went out of print. The techniques stopped being passed down. And within 2 generations, most American families had completely forgotten that their grandparents never paid a water bill in their lives. Think about that for a second. Here's what makes this so brilliant and so simple that it almost sounds stupid when you first hear it. Water management isn't complicated when you stop fighting gravity and start working with it. The Nabatean system, and variations of it that have been used across North Africa, ancient China, and pre-colonial South America, all operate on the same 3 principles. First, slow it down. When rain hits hard ground, it runs off. When it hits prepared ground with channels and barriers, it slows, spreads, and sinks. That one change, slowing water's movement, multiplies how much you capture by a factor of 3 to 5. Second, filter it through layers. Earth, gravel, and sand are extraordinary natural filters. Water that passes through 6 to 12 inches of layered earth arrives at your storage point cleaner than most tap water, because the biological and mineral processes happening in healthy soil actually neutralize pathogens and heavy metals. Simple chemistry. It's been doing this for billions of years. Third, seal it underground. Covered underground storage stays cool, which dramatically reduces evaporation and algae growth. A properly sealed underground cistern can hold water for 6 to 12 months with minimal quality loss. Your refrigerator keeps food cold to preserve it. The earth does the exact same thing for water. Slow, filter, seal. That's the whole system. 3,000 years of engineering compressed into 3 words. Now let's talk about how you actually build this, because everything I've described so far is useless if you can't put it in the ground yourself. The basic version of this system has 3 components, and you can build the starter version over a single weekend using materials you either already have or can get for under $50. The first component is your catchment surface. This is whatever surface you're using to collect the rain. A rooftop, a tarp stretched between poles, or a section of naturally sloped ground. The key here is surface area and slope. You want a gentle slope, about the angle you'd see on a typical roof, directing water in a single direction. For every 100 square feet of catchment surface, you can expect to collect roughly 60 gallons of water from a single inch of rainfall. So even a modest 200 square foot setup gives you 120 gallons from one rain event. The second component is your slowdown channel. This is where most DIY systems fail, because people skip this step and wonder why their cistern fills with silt. Before water reaches your storage, it needs to travel through at least one silt trap, a shallow basin, roughly the size of a large plastic storage bin, that allows sediment to settle out. Line the base of your channel with a layer of gravel about the height of a standard coffee mug, then a layer of coarse sand, then a final layer of fine sand. Water that passes through this is visibly clearer and significantly cleaner than what went in. The third component is your underground cistern. Now, the original Nabatean cisterns were carved directly into bedrock, but you don't need to do that. A buried food-grade poly tank, the kind used for rainwater harvesting, works perfectly and can be found secondhand for $40 to $100. Bury it so the top sits about 6 inches below the soil surface, which gives you the temperature regulation benefit without making access difficult. Run your filtered channel water directly into the inlet and seal the top with a fitted cover that allows overflow to escape, but prevents insects and debris from entering. Connect the overflow from your cistern back to a secondary smaller basin positioned a few feet away and several inches lower. This is your recharge basin, a shallow, unlined pit filled with layered gravel that allows overflow water to slowly sink back into the surrounding soil. This is the part that creates the loop. This is what makes it endless, because that soil moisture doesn't disappear. It slowly seeps back down toward your cistern's level, recharging the surrounding water table and extending your effective storage across the landscape. In 2 weeks, you'll see the soil around your system noticeably darker and more moisture retentive. In 30 days, you'll have a measurable water reserve that costs you nothing to maintain. In a single season, a well-set system can provide a significant portion of your garden's irrigation needs without touching a tap. Common mistake number 1, building the cistern too shallow. Anything less than 2 feet below the surface loses the temperature regulation benefit, and you'll see water quality decline. Deeper is better. Common mistake number 2, skipping the silt trap. 1 season of silt buildup will clog a system faster than anything else. Build the trap. It takes an extra hour and saves you from a headache that will otherwise ruin the whole setup. Common mistake number 3, no overflow plan. A cistern without a managed overflow becomes a flood during heavy rain. Always plan where the excess goes. And as I described, putting that overflow to work in a recharge basin is the move that transforms a collection system into a regenerative one. I know what the skeptical part of your brain is saying right now. That sounds too clean, too simple, too good. And I understand that because we've been trained to believe that anything worth having requires complexity and ongoing payment. But ask yourself this: Why would a civilization use a system that didn't work? The Nabateans built an empire in a desert using this method. The Yemeni plateau farmers used almost identical systems for 2,000 years to grow grain in conditions that modern agricultural science says shouldn't support farming at all. This principle, slow, filter, store, recharge, isn't a trick or a shortcut. It's just physics. And the last time I checked, physics doesn't change based on what's profitable. The cost comparison alone is staggering. A basic system like I described can be built for under $100 using mostly reclaimed materials. That's compared to $200 a year in water bills. In 12 months, you've more than paid for it. In 10 years, you've kept over $10,000 in your own pocket instead of sending it somewhere else. Now, one thing I want to address is that this isn't a one-size-fits-all system, and that's actually one of its greatest strengths. If you're in a wet climate, the Pacific Northwest, the Southeast, anywhere with 30 or more inches of annual rainfall, even a modest catchment surface gives you more water than you'll need for a full garden season. You can afford to build multiple cisterns, daisy chain them together, and create a cascading storage system that gives you water reserves through even a dry summer. If you're in an arid climate, the math changes, but the principle doesn't. In dry regions, you compensate with larger catchment surfaces and deeper, more insulated cisterns. You build your recharge basins in multiple locations to maximize soil moisture across a wider area. Some families in high desert regions have used this type of system to maintain productive food gardens through summer months with zero supplemental irrigation from any outside source. The key adaptation is to harvest more aggressively when rain comes and store deeper, so you're drawing from a cooler, slower evaporating reserve. If you're working with a small urban or suburban space, don't let that stop you. A scaled down version, a catchment tarp, a 55-gallon buried drum, a simple gravel filter channel, can still provide 30 to 50 gallons per rain event, which is more than enough to handle a raised bed garden with zero water cost. Let's be real about what you just learned. You just learned that for 3,000 years, before municipalities existed, before water bills existed, before any of this infrastructure that you pay for monthly, people were managing their own water. Effectively, in deserts, without a single piece of modern equipment, you learned that this knowledge was allowed to disappear, not because it stopped working, but because it stopped generating revenue for someone else. And you learned that the system itself is 3 simple principles. Slow it down, filter it through the earth, seal it underground, that anyone with a weekend, $50, and a piece of land can implement starting right now. No chemicals, no monthly fee, no permission required. Here's your one action for today. Go outside and look at your land, or your roof, or your yard, and identify where the water goes when it rains. Watch where it flows, notice where it pools, notice where it disappears. That observation, that 15-minute walk, is the first step of the whole system. Because the Nabateans didn't start by digging, they started by watching. They learned the language of their land before they ever picked up a tool. Do that today, and tomorrow you'll know exactly where to put your first channel. If you want more of these recovered methods, the ones that were quietly left to fade while the infrastructure economy grew up around us, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the next one. I'm uncovering these forgotten systems every week, and some of what's coming is going to genuinely change how you think about self-sufficiency. Drop a comment below and let me know. Are you in a wet climate or a dry one? Because that changes the specific build, and I want to make sure the follow-up covers your situation. And share this with someone who needs to see it. Someone who's tired of paying for what the sky gives for free. They can let the old books go out of print. They can regulate the easy options away. But they cannot stop the rain from falling on your land. They cannot stop the earth from filtering it clean. And they cannot stop you from storing what is already yours. That knowledge is back now. It belongs to you. Use it.